Waterfall, the CCW podcast.
Hello and welcome to Waterfall. It's the water saving podcast brought to you by CCW, that's the Consumer Council for Water. We represent everyone who drinks water in England and Wales. That's a lot of people, Karen. Are you big enough for that?
Well, I think we're all up for the challenge.
Absolutely, Karen. So I'm here, as usual, with the wonderful guru, which is Karen, and of course, producer Tom. Hi, Tom.
Hi, everyone. Privilege, as always, to be here with you guys and to be spreading the water efficiency message.
Excellent. And that is exactly what we're all about here on Waterfall. We're all about saving water, saving money, protecting the environment, and combating climate change. We have got a super interesting show today because we are speaking to Richard Reynolds. Now, I think I sort of misheard you at first and thought we had Ryan Reynolds on. I was thinking how awesome that would be. But, we've got Richard Reynolds, and he was a great guest. Not quite Hollywood, but, and he is an agronomist for Anglian Water. So we're going down on the farm to speak to Richard. But Karen, why the farm? What's the farm got to do with water and water efficiency? And
I think in this episode, what we're trying to highlight is the increasing need to manage water in a much more holistic way and to support not only our water supply, which is obviously what we're particularly interested in, but importantly, the importance of protecting water supplies to help with food production as well.
Oh, that's a good point. We often talk about water supplies in the context of public water coming to your taps, but also water is used in so many other ways too. So, no, good point, and we'll get into that in just a few minutes. Yeah, we can't start the show though without getting onto something slightly tangential, of course. Now, you do know that for my love of toilets, and Karen, I think you're still shell shocked from the question last time. Not the loo rolls, but the loo scrolls. I think you're still trying to get over that.
I'm still having nightmares about it.
To be fair, you've come back for more recording, so that's a good sign. Slightly under duress, I think. So here's the first question. Do you have some kind of AI assistant at home, like an Alexa?
No, I'm very analog, me.
Okay, Tom?
I don't actually. They sort of freak me out a little bit, so I kind of avoid.
I'm glad it's not just me.
Okay, well, so our house is fully wired up, right, with our assistants in pretty much almost every room. And your paranoia is probably well placed because it clearly is listening, right? So couple of ours have displays, and on a few months ago, the display had, and this clearly is no coincidence, fact of the day. And the fact of the day was, well, I'm going to pitch it as a question, okay? What was the first American film to feature a toilet flushing?
Wow, that's a really good question.
No, so out of all the films in the world, out of all the American films, which one was that then? Shall I give you a clue? Shall we narrow it down to a decade? It was in the 1960s. A famous thriller.
Is it Psycho?
Oh my word, you are correct.
Is it?
Wow.
Well done, Tom.
Regular listeners, I promise you this was no setup, right?
No.
This was
I was just thinking the shower scene,
the
famous shower scene, so I don't,
Wow. Tom, that was very, I was amazed. I'm amazed and impressed.
Actually, the other thing that it also helps with is it makes the case for not spending too long in the shower.
Is that really our top water efficiency message? You might get stabbed to death by a psychopath. Is that I don't know, I think we need to maybe find a slightly more palatable. I'm the one who's shocked now, Karen. So this was the fact of the day. So did you know that Alfred Hitchcock's 1960 film Psycho was the first American film to feature a toilet flushing? There's one that that's going to help you in pub quizzes for years to come. Shall we move on? Shall we remind people how they can get in touch with the show?
You can certainly email us on podcast@ccwater.org.uk.
And of course, you can check us out on the socials. Just search for Waterfall Podcast on X, which is Twitter and Instagram. You will find some stuff that's very interesting and vaguely amusing, I would suggest. So check us out. Right, it's time for us now to go and bring on the guest.
This podcast is brought to you by CCW, the voice for water consumers.
So it's brilliant to welcome Richard Reynolds to Waterfall. Hi, Richard. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad.
Thanks for agreeing to come on. Now, you have got a job title that I've never come across before. You are Senior Agronomy Manager at Anglian Water. Is that correct?
That is correct.
What on earth is that then?
Well, you weren't the first person that got confused by the title. Our HR department bounced around a couple of times trying to work out how to spell it and what it is. The best way I'd describe it is everybody knows what a vet does. I'm a vet for plants. So the specialization around what is the problem with the plants, how are they growing, what are the various things that farmers can do to fix it. So the easiest, an agronomist's job is essentially advising farmers on how do we manage, how do we get the most productive crops growing in the land that they have with the limitations and all those sort of things that they have. So really important from a water company's perspective when we're looking at things that are impacting drinking water quality and quantity, that we can speak to people from that context of, we know the problem, how do I talk to somebody that can actually make a difference about it? So having somebody that understands that language is always useful.
So when you think of a vet, the first thing I think of is the image on Creatures Great and Small, where the guy's got his hands up a cow's backside, right? So what's the agronomist's equivalent of that?
Fortunately, none going down that kind of line there, but agronomists typically spend a lot of time walking around fields, looking at the diseases, looking at how plants are growing, and then making recommendations on what sort of chemicals might be used, what sort of management. That's probably the most high profile bit of it, but a lot of it is also working with farmers to say, well, what is the most productive crops to be able to grow? And this is where agronomy has probably changed in the last 20, 30 years, from simply a chemical salesman to a key part of that farm business that brings in some extra knowledge, extra understanding. They need to have a good understanding of the sort of grant schemes and those sort of things around what are you going to be growing, what are the markets likely to be doing. So they far more a kind of technical business partner than in the old days, just a salesman driving up the driveway saying, well, get another couple of liters of this and spray. And that agronomist role has changed hugely because of the kind of the values, the drivers, the natures of farming.
And is this role something unique to Anglian Water, or do other water companies have something similar?
Every water company in probably the last 5 to 10 years has got a catchment management team. Every company will look at the role in different ways. Some of the companies have got teams of 30, 35 people in them, where there's a lot of individual conversations. Others will take a far more hands-off approach and bring in third-party specialists, third parties to manage those sort of conversations. We kind of sit somewhere in the middle where we want to make sure that we have those links, we have those one-to-one conversations with farmers, but probably a stronger focus from our side is also that technical side. So everyone in my team has got a lot of those qualifications that a farmer's advisor would have, so that when we are talking, we can say, well, this is the implication of moving from one chemical to another one, talking about changes of crop rotations and those sort of things. So every team is different, and a lot of it is around the sorts of challenges that we're facing. So the things we face in the East and East Anglia are driven a lot more by your kind of broad acre crops, your arable farming, where across in the West, livestock are a much bigger factor in it. So the skill set that you need to talk in there. So everybody's got them and everybody does it slightly differently.
So if you're just a random person listening to this with no knowledge of the water sector, just help provide some context that it would seem quite unusual. Why are water companies hiring people to basically talk plants to farmers? What on earth has that got to do with the water that comes out my taps?
So essentially what we're trying to do is translate for what a lot of us think is relatively simple. Well, the nuances of what the water company needs don't necessarily, it's not the same sort of language that a farmer's talking about. Often they're focusing on their farm. They don't have any way of monitoring what's washed off the field. They know something's lost. They don't know the cumulative impact of that. And what we've found is that we've had some brilliant scientists who are really good at science and can talk water science and those sort of things, but they don't have the skill set of being able to talk to farmers and go onto the farm and talk in a way that says, we want to work together on this, rather than you causing pollution, you're doing this and that. And what we've realized what's really important here is that for us to be able to manage some of the challenges that we have, we need to bring that farming community on board. And the most important there is that human factor. It's if I can talk to you, if I can contextualize the problems we're facing in language that you are understanding around a world that you are, it makes it far easier for you to become a partner of that solution, rather than you've caused a problem and you're bad. And that's historically, we probably had far more of that kind of oversimplification. And now it's a little bit of actually, how can we work together on these things?
So just for my simple brain, you had water companies would have water quality nerds who could talk the language of what's in the river and what does all that mean in terms of, I don't know, invertebrates or levels of phosphates and levels of nitrates or whatever. And what you are as an intelligent interpreter to be the halfway house between the nerds and the farmers to help the farmers do the right thing on their land to stop bad stuff getting washed into water. Is that a fair summary?
So essentially what we've said is, no, farmers don't immediately go out and try to cause problems. If nothing, it's their farming practices, they're doing as best they can. But sometimes it's, well, what can we do? How can we flag those sort of contexts? When you've got soil washing off, do you actually know that there's nutrients attached to it? What are you potentially losing? One of the things we go out a lot and say is, everything if everything you put onto the land stays on the land, that's great. But if you lose it off the land, it's costing you as a farmer money because you've spent money on those inputs, and it's costing us as a water company. And if we can work together to find ways to keep more of the things that you're putting on the land there, either by changing your practices or by just giving you some information over there, whatever support we can do, it's good for your business and it's good for our business. And one of the big things that we try and take is there's lots of environmental organizations talking to farmers. And what we've said is, how do we take a different perspective on this? How do we talk about it? And if we can take it as a business to business conversation, there's not the same accusations, there's not the same sort of emotion. It's here's an input, and we've got a way of monitoring that your business is losing this particular asset. What can we do together to make sure that you keep more of the thing that you spent money on the land doing the work, what it's going to do? Sometimes it's fundamentally changing what you're doing. Sometimes it's really small nuances and tweaks and changes. But how can we work together on those sort of challenges? Because generally farmers don't have a way of getting that sort of information. They've got no way of measuring good there. They spray, and the best you see is the disease is no longer there. But what you've got no idea is, has half of the product that you spent a huge amount of money on actually washed off the field? It didn't actually do the job. So it is kind of trying to get these balances, which is why it's really important to have people that can understand the water industry side, but also can understand that farming context. So they can look and say, I see the way you're doing it here. Have you thought about this? What are the things that we could do? It makes it sound easy.
And what have been some of the more successful projects that you've been involved with?
Oh, so when we started off back in 2015, there was a chemical called metaldehyde, which is essentially the chemical that's used to kill slugs. And it perfectly legal to use, so none of the farmers were doing anything wrong. The problem with metaldehyde is that we couldn't treat it in drinking water. So somebody described it to me as a ball of wool played with by a couple of 3-year-olds and then dunked into a pot of honey. The molecule is incredibly complicated, and all of the treatment processes we had could barely do anything with it. And we were coming to a kind of dead end in terms of what options were around. So my team was brought in, and in fact, where we got started was, how can we talk to farmers? Is there a different way of addressing it rather than that traditional, we'll just engineer a solution out? How can we work with farmers in a non-kind of accusational, you just being bad? And we were pushing a huge, not to have it banned, because I think often bans are a crude tool to remove something. For us, it was about drinking water quality. So if the metaldehyde, now anybody that's using metaldehyde below one of our drinking water sources is not a drinking water challenge. So we were saying there needs to be a proportionality. If those farmers downstream of it can't use it, but essentially, to make a long story short, we worked together with farmers around solutions that we could do. We raised awareness. Fortunately, there was another product called ferric phosphate that was organic, so it tied in with a lot of those sort of values. It does have phosphate in it, which can be a kind of trigger, but actually the levels are very, very low, and they're not contributing in any meaningful way there. But what we did was talk to farmers and say, how can we build confidence in the product? What are you were using them, and probably the most important thing that came to me was we were talking to a group of farmers, and I visited a farmer who said to me, young man, one of the things that you need to remember is metaldehyde is a water company problem. Slugs are a farmer's problem. And contextualizing what we see, too often it was a problem with our brilliant scientists, if they came to the farmers with this is our problem, not even speaking the language of the farmers. The moment we changed our program from metaldehyde reduction to how can we work with you to manage your slug problem, we got a whole load more farmers on board because we were now part of the solution. We understood their world. And one of the big things with metaldehyde was when the slugs ate the metaldehyde, they left a slimy trail all over the ground and then died. So when you put the metaldehyde down that you've killed the slugs. The problem with ferric phosphate is it made the slugs stop eating, they went underground and they died underground. So that slugs are about to come through. You're seeing your crops starting to get eaten and those sort of things. The other problem we had, the ferric phosphate, which was the alternative, was more expensive than metaldehyde. And we had the water company coming through and saying, we'd like you to use this more expensive product, but when you put it down, you won't actually see that it's worked. So what risks are you prepared to take as a farmer? Both are legal products. What can we do? And we spoke to farmers and said, well, what is the difference? What is the challenges that they are seeing? Cost was the biggest issue. So we said, okay, we'll do a trial. We'll cover the cost difference between what you would be normally spending on metaldehyde and ferric phosphate. How can you manage that? Would that help you see what that's like? We did it in a small area. We didn't do it any wide scale. We did it essentially just around our reservoirs. And that program allowed farmers time to see how these different products work. It was entirely voluntary around all of our reservoirs. Just saying, how can we be part of the solution? If the only reason you're not considering ferric phosphate is the cost, and we can take that out, it gives you a chance to see, does this work in your farm business? And that's what we try to do, is how can we put ourselves as a partner? How can we help you manage some of that risk? Because one of the things I keep reminding people inside the company is a lot of us get paid a salary once a month. Farmers get paid a salary once a year. So they are naturally a lot more risk averse. And one of the things, if you only got paid a salary once a year, how many risks would you take in month one? And this is the whole thing of farmers are coming from a different perspective. If we come with a bit more experience there, we can hopefully provide solutions that work for farmers rather than are kind of imposed in on different areas and that sort of stuff. So our metaldehyde program, to bring us back to the question, reduced metaldehyde in the end over a kind of 3-4 year period by 98%. Actually, metaldehyde was subsequently banned for other reasons. But one of the most important things that it built us was also trust and credibility in that farming world. So instead of just saying, well, we'll just get everything banned, we'll move on from there, it was, how can we make you part of that solution? What are the things that we can do? And those have been the really important building blocks that we've had moving forward, is how have we approached? What are the things? How have we built the trust? How can we talk with farmers and make them a partner rather than just, you've done something wrong and we've decided as the water company that we know more about farming than you do?
What would you like Waterfall to cover next? Send your water-saving topics to podcast@ccwater.org.uk.
That's a really good success story. I've got one of the things we talk about a lot on Waterfall, not just toilets, before Karen and Tom wonder where I'm going with this, is about climate change and the impact of climate change. obviously one of your key things you focus on is stopping bad stuff getting washed into watercourses. Have you seen an increase in the runoff due to extreme rainfall events over the last few years? Or what's your lived experience of that?
Oh, definitely. Certainly those extreme events, and this kind of comes into how our program has evolved from a very simple model of go up driveways, talk to farmers. If you're lucky, you'll get some cake and some tea, and very much one-to-one conversations. But when metaldehyde, as that kind of moved away and we were more in control of that sort of a conversation, it was a little bit of, are we going to be a one-trick pony? We've spoken to farmers around this. The challenge has now been managed. We don't need to. Actually, the whole conversation piece started evolving and saying, well, what are the other things? We did have pesticides, but there's also nutrients, whether it be nitrogen, whether it be phosphates and those sort of things, but also water holding capacity. All of those different bits and pieces were building blocks that we've evolved our farmer engagement approach to say, actually, it's the same communities that we can talk to, and often we can deliver far more by working with them. So a lot of our program has now moved on to what we call soil health. So what can we do to get that soil a more functioning capacity? And there's a concept that's come around recently called regenerative farming. I say recently because it's become popularized recently. Some might say it's kind of old-fashioned good farming, but it got and wherever you look, we'll have different ways of explaining it, and different people are passionate on different things. But broadly, the best explanation I've heard is, if you walk through a forest, you know what the soils are like there. Now, the potential should be, theoretically, around the country, that all the soils could be growing like that. Now, through the agricultural processes, the way the land's been managed in the last 50, 60 years, it's moved away from that very nutritious environment, that kind of forest soils back. But it's also lost the opportunity to buffer against a lot of weather events. So it's lost the chance of that water holding capacity. And a lot of that's through modern agricultural practices, because we've been plowing, because of the various products that have been used. Regenerative farming is trying to move more back over there. There's some people that are very much disciples and are down the far end of the spectrum, but all these pressures that are coming through, that, you know, the kind of climate extremes and that sort of stuff, we need to have a buffering capacity into that soil. We need for that soil to be able to share a bit more of that load. And our soil health program, in all sorts of different forms and the way it ties with different farmers, is essentially, how can we get more of that soil doing more of that work? How can we get more life back into that soil, the organic matter into the soil and that sort of stuff? And if we can work towards those things, it will provide more flood resilience and those sort of things, more buffering against extreme weather. So our program's moved from a very simple pesticide problem, how do we fix it, to step out a bit. It's a bit of a bigger challenge, but yeah, how do we bring in the whole environment? And things like biodiversity, net gain absolutely tie into this, the whole carbon world. And this is, modern farming has got a huge amount of challenges, as farmers are losing a lot of the subsidies that they historically relied on. But there's an opportunity, as government, as private markets and those sort of things also start looking to invest in these sort of things, that actually we can make farmers partners in all of this sort of thing. So our world's evolved a lot more from where we were to where we are now. It's a bit more tricky now, but
indeed. And in terms of your sort of longer term plans for this area of work, how will you be taking things forward in the future?
A lot will focus around this world of regenerative farming. A lot is also focusing on partnerships. So fortunately, regenerative farming in its broadest sense is something that makes sense to a lot of different parts of our business, but also to our kind of customers and communities. Of actually, what can we do? We're in a unique position as the kind of, by area, the biggest water company. We've got a huge number of farmers in our area that we can work with. And actually, it's not about what any one individual can do, but can we work with groups? Who can we work with that also has influence here and use these other drivers that people are coming with in terms of sustainability and interest and that sort of stuff, and marshal that all together so that one of the outputs it is better water quality, better water quantity, and all those sort of things. And it's trying to find a more sophisticated approach that doesn't look for one problem, one solution, but rather takes a more holistic approach. So one of the things that we're promoting is what's known as cover crops, which are essentially, the philosophy is don't let the ground stay bare. We know what it's like when you have your garden. The moment you leave it, the weeds start growing and those things. Nature doesn't like an empty space. After we've harvested crops, if we can put in some beneficial ones that have got nice deep roots that hold the nutrients, hold the water, actually all those nutrients that are sitting in the soil could be taken up by these cover crops. Instead of it's a bare surface, the rain comes through and everything washes out. So what can we do? How can we use these plants that got a really long taproot that's going in to bring nutrients, pull them out, hold that stability and those sort of things? So we're using cover crops. Cover crops have got a benefit in terms of what, they've got multiple benefits that they're doing. And what we're trying to do is find more sophisticated things. I mentioned partnerships, because instead of trying to do a whole lot of stuff on our own, what we are saying, who else is interested there? Whether it be the supply chain, the people that are buying the crops from the farmers, and a lot of them have got corporate drivers as well. Where can we work together in partnership? So if I want to work with a farm in an area, and the guy that's buying their wheat wants to work with them, or the guy that's buying their barley wants to work with those farmers, it makes sense to say, well, how can we match up together? And we've got a scheme at the moment where it's tied up with a partner or a couple of partners in the supply chain, one of the local councils, and their driver is, my driver is drinking water quality. The council's concerned more on floods. The supply chain are concentrated on the sustainability of their crops. Everybody wants something slightly different, but we're all talking to the same farmer. So how can we overlap what we're doing? And I think that's where the biggest change and going forward is about how do we stack up all of those conversations and we're having, and hopefully the farmer is a beneficiary out of this, as well as all of the different sectors, rather than it's my little box, my little conversation, nobody else can tie into it. So it's more difficult. We need to have more sophisticated conversations. And it is also, but it's a really good way of bringing in the likes of our customers, because I would say we don't do a particularly good job of talking about things like catchment management, of how are we talking to thousands of farmers across our region and making them part of that solution. We don't do it as well as we could, but I think it's a really good one.
And I'm guessing as time goes on and you've got more of these projects that you can showcase, you will be able to explore those other opportunities and get quite a positive response, I would imagine, from the local community.
Absolutely. I think we're probably too farmer focused and forget the fact that farmers farm in farming communities. They've got people who walk the paths around their fields and probably know a lot of the boundaries around their fields almost better than they do, and it's those sort of things that we're kind of looking to tie in and say, actually, if we're investing in an area, we need to tell the story, looking at those sort of soils and being able to say, we're working with this farmer around your village to improve the soils, to manage this, to manage that. To me, that's what I look forward to. I don't necessarily have that skill set myself, but it's about, well, how can we bring more people in to tell those stories? That's where, when kind of I heard about this podcast, this is exactly what we need.
That's been really interesting, Richard. And I think it's fair to say that, we've recognised increasingly how these projects not only have a sort of wider environmental benefit, but they can have, sort of additional benefits in terms of food production as well. So, it really is a win-win, isn't it?
Yeah. One of the things that we've changed also is our whole approach to talking to farmers. So instead of historically, we would say, and a lot of schemes would say, this is the problem. We've decided as a water company what the solutions are. And it might be that you can't farm within X many meters of a river, and we are going to pay you this amount of money to do that. What we in our catchment team have changed around and said, well, how do we know that that's the right solution for that farmer? So what we've turned around and said, where are we monitoring? Where are we taking that water in? What's the problem that we see? But then talk around to the farmers and say, from your perspective, what can you do to manage that? What it's changed is suddenly instead of making the farmers part of the problem of you've done this wrong, we've made them part of the solution. And I think that's the biggest evolution, is how can we bring that farming community along with it? Because they've got also, farming is going to change massively. We're going to have different crops grown, and with all the climate and that sort of stuff. The more they're aware of what are the challenges from our side, how can they bring innovation? How can they bring in new ideas? And we've got a farming grant running at the moment that is called the Farm Innovation Grant. And it very clearly says, this is our problem. What can you do to contribute to it? And yeah, we're looking at it at the moment. I'll catch up with you at some stage and tell you all the great ideas that they had. But if you give a community an opportunity to share in that, rather than saying, we've decided the problem and the solution, you generally get a lot further than you would any other way. So that's a way we've evolved our long term, is to how to push a lot more of these things, these sort of approaches, and long may it last.
Obviously, there's a whole furore about pollution in rivers, right? And water companies take a hell of a lot of flack about that. Some of it justified, some of it unjustified. And when you look at the evidence, you see that farming contributes more to river water pollution than water companies' activities. So a lot of the time you've been talking, you've sort of said actually farmers don't see it as necessarily their problem. Is that the case? Do they not recognise that what they're doing causes pollution?
It depends on where you are and what you're doing. And that farming landscape is quite complicated. And sometimes they may recognise that they're not doing best practice, but they don't have the infrastructure, they don't have the skills. A lot of it comes down to land tenure and those sort of things, but they often don't have the opportunity to change it themselves. We've got 10,500 farmers in our region, so you've got all sorts of a basket. And it is kind of saying, well, what can we do? How can we support? So sometimes it's connecting with other bits of funding, sometimes it's advice, and we do a lot in terms of advice. Where we do have specific pollution issues, we'll follow it up, because sometimes there's a leak somewhere and the farmer didn't even realize it. Other times, absolutely, it's intended, and we do work together with partners with the regulators, and where relevant, we'll work together on them. So there is a whole basket, and what we want to do is say, well, where can we contribute to this sort of conversation? How can we do it? My driver is, what are the things that it's currently too risky for you to do, so you're not taking that next step? And agriculture is a fairly conservative world. What are the things that we can help you learn about? Try something that gives you better information so you can make your own decision. If you're looking at two different crops, can we help fund a trial where you do one crop in one half of the field and the other one that's currently too expensive in the other half, and we'll cover some of the costs there, but actually making a decision and learning how to do those means that you're in a better position to go forward. We're not going to subsidize you all the way to do those things, but if we can help share some of that risk so that it helps you adopt stuff, and that's where, like our innovation grant, a lot of the things we're doing is things about mapping soils in a much more detail than farmers would normally do. But if that gives them a better insight on, how can I manage my land? How might I do something different? How might I cultivate something? One of the things we do is sometimes farmers are thinking about buying a new piece of kit. We'll help them lease it for a year or two, so that they've tried it and they know how it works or doesn't work, and they can make a better business decision when they go to buy a piece of kit. Our grant schemes, a lot of the government grant schemes, you have to buy brand new. Our grant scheme says, if you can get it secondhand, if you can retrofit an existing piece of kit that you've got so that you can get more of those values, try it out. So we're not the big funder that can fund huge amounts of things, but if I can help you get a better understanding of that risk, those are the things where I think we can really help. And so, could you try this? Could you try that? It still needs to stack up, and the farmer as a business still needs to make that final decision. We can't subsidize in perpetuity, but if you now know that option is more profitable than this one, and then can pursue it, to me, we can kind of catalyze those sort of conversations, which is where at the moment we want to position ourselves.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Richard. Yeah, we ask all our guests on Waterfall what their personal water use is. I think you've been pre-warned.
Listening a couple of podcasts, you can definitely hear the trend. It was interesting because I hadn't really thought about it beforehand. So I did a bundle of different calculators, and depending on the calculator you use, you get all sorts of different numbers and those sort of things. So it probably got me thinking more than anything. But I would calculate my water use. That my preferred one was 114 liters a day. We live in a household with 4 people, but one's a sort of 7-year-old. So our total use for the daily use for the household is about 400 liters. So you could kind of divide it by 3.5. So the calculator that I seemed to stabilize with was the 114 liters a day.
What was your unpreferred measure?
Some of these are how many times you do. It's the bits it takes to put in there on how many times you run a dishwasher, how many times you run a washing machine. It goes up and down, and it is those averages of, well, depending on this, depending on that. But I think it's a good exercise to do. Nicely
avoided the question there.
Yeah, I think they're all kind of different, and I think I tried about 5 or 6. Eventually was looking at ones in America and all those sort of things. I'm overthinking this now.
Oh wow, you should be sticking with CCW's one.
It was one of the better ones, I would say.
Well, 114 litres per person per day. It's decent. It's well below the average.
What's the average? About 140, 150?
Yeah, 140, in the mid 140s. So yeah, no, brilliant. Great. Karen, anything you want to add here?
No, I mean, I think, it's, again, an opportunity to remind people that, if you have lower than average water use, it's well worth checking out your local company's calculator or the CCW one, because it may well be financially advantageous to switch to a meter.
Yeah, no, absolutely. If you are a low user, and you're not on a meter, well worth switching. Okay, well, Richard, thank you so much for joining us. It's really fascinating to find out about your world. I had a ride on a gator a few weeks ago. Do you know what a gator is?
Yeah.
It was new to me. So I'm hoping we might get a ride on a tractor one day. So could you arrange that?
Tractors, combine harvesters. This is the patch. Easy.
Oh, brilliant. We all heard this, right? We all heard this. That's practically a contract, okay?
Right.
So we'll come and see some of your schemes next summer when it's nice and hot.
Yeah, no, it is. And it is. Catchment management is growing. Every company will have a different scheme and a different way to challenge what they've got. So, speaking to other companies will have different ways, and it is about kind of connecting with your local community. But it is, for me, amazing at how it's changed as an approach just in the last 5-10 years. One of the useful things I have is that I chair Water UK's catchment network. So there's 20 UK water companies, and although we don't talk as much around other things, in terms of the catchment management, the farmer engagement, we all talk together and we share. And last year, Anglian Water hosted the first Catchment Advisor conference to get people from all 20 companies talking and saying, well, what are the problems that you have? How do you address them? Because it's a growing world. And we're talking about planning the next one for next year. And the number of people and the whole community is changing. There's more people coming into it. We might even get you guys down there. But it is interesting. It's a great area to be part of in terms of the water business. And more, how are we talking to those local communities? How are we bringing them into the solutions that we're traditionally, we put pipes in the ground and we'll engineer a solution and we don't have to talk to anybody beyond the gate. That still will be there, but there's a lot more on this. Talk to the communities. What's going on? How can you make them part of the solutions, which makes it a really exciting and interesting place to be.
Brilliant. Thank you, Richard. Thank you so much for joining Waterfall, and it'd be great to find out more about your projects in the future.
Cheers.
So, bye.
Be sure to head back through the archives and check out all the past episodes of Waterfall.
So that was Richard Reynolds there. Really interesting stuff. Great to hear from someone who's doing something very practical in terms of working with the farming community. What do you make of that, Karen?
Well, I completely agree. I think it's really good to
see the water companies like Anglian, building these partnerships with other sectors, and particularly the agricultural sector, which, as you said earlier, is so significant in the way water is managed more generally. So I think it's great. And it sounds as though by pursuing these partnerships, they're actually arriving at solutions that provide benefits for both parties.
Yeah, always good. I mean, it's slightly cheesy, but a win-win clearly is a good thing, right? I mean, it was also really helpful in the kind of very heated environment that exists when it comes to conversations about river pollution, to actually shine a light on a different source of pollution. Because, often when we talk about the context of rivers and bad things getting in rivers, people jump straight to, well, it's sewage. But actually, I think what's not spoken about as much is the fact that agriculture contributes towards stuff that shouldn't be there in rivers. So actually seeing Richard working super constructively to put a stop to that, to stopping bad stuff in terms of nitrates and phosphates getting in rivers and water courses, it is really positive. And I think that this will pay dividends into the future. So it's a matter of, I suppose, trying to keep doing it. And hopefully it will have a big impact, because we do need to take more steps to make sure we've got a sustainable natural environment. So loads of food for thought in there. Tried to tie back into the farming thing there. Food for thought. See what I did? It's always a bad side if you have to explain your own comments.
Tom and I need to be a bit more on the mark, don't we?
Well, it is Friday. It is Friday. Is this another low point for Waterfall? Anyway, right. Look, that was really fascinating stuff. We're pretty much done for time. Don't forget, you can get in touch with the show.
You can email us on podcast@ccwater.org.uk.
And check us out on the socials. Just search for Waterfall Podcast. We would love it if you hit that subscribe button so you'll never miss an episode. Yeah, and I'm sorry, I was just pausing there because I thought Tom was saying don't forget our extensive back catalogue.
Oh, yeah, well, it is still there, everyone, yeah. Season 3 in particular, I mean, just looking back now, we kicked off with Waterfall Live, Norfolk Broadsides, Leaky Loos, Rewiggling Rivers, Tony's Water Saving Odyssey, which is an episode that's very close to all three of our hearts. We had the Colombian special, the fog special. We've been working a lot on this podcast, and I think, it's showing in the numbers. And I just want to urge everyone to go back through the archive and, download them all, please. Yeah, going from strength to strength. So thank you to everyone who listens. And we do love hearing from you directly. And still no word from Superfan Steve whether he actually wants to come on or not. But we'll keep trying. I think we need to mention him now every single episode. So come on, Steve. Get in there. Tell us your water saving tips. Right. So that's it. It's goodbye from me, Mike.
Goodbye from me, Karen.
And goodbye from me, producer Tom. Be careful in the shower because, you might be stabbed.